Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about fault code P0840, which stands for Transmission Fluid Pressure Sensor/Switches Circuit. This code can be a bit of a pain to diagnose, but I'm going to walk you through the steps on how to do it. First, we'll need to identify the location of the transmission fluid pressure sensor. This sensor is typically located on the side of the transmission, near the valve body. Once you've located the sensor, you'll need to check the wiring and connector for any damage. If the wiring or connector is damaged, you'll need to repair or replace it. If the wiring and connector are in good condition, you'll need to test the sensor itself. You can do this by using a multimeter to measure the voltage and resistance of the sensor. If the sensor is faulty, you'll need to replace it. Once you've replaced the sensor, you'll need to clear the fault code from the computer. You can do this by using a scan tool. I hope this video has been helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment below. The P0840 code is a generic OBD2 code that indicates a problem with the transmission fluid pressure sensor/switches circuit. This code can be caused by a variety of factors, including a faulty sensor, a wiring problem, or a problem with the transmission itself. The P0840 code means that the powertrain control module, PCM, has detected a problem with the transmission fluid pressure sensor/switches circuit. This sensor is responsible for monitoring the pressure of the transmission fluid, and it sends this information to the PCM. The PCM uses this information to control the transmission's operation. There are a number of potential causes for the P0840 code. These include a faulty transmission fluid pressure sensor/switch, a wiring problem in the transmission fluid pressure sensor/switch circuit, a problem with the transmission itself. The symptoms of the P0840 code can vary depending on the underlying cause. However, some common symptoms include the check engine light coming on, harsh shifting, slipping transmission, loss of power, increased fuel consumption. The P0840 code is a relatively common code, and it can be caused by a variety of factors. If you are experiencing this code, it is important to have it diagnosed and repaired by a qualified mechanic as soon as possible. If you are experiencing the P0840 code, there are a few things you can do to troubleshoot the problem. Check the transmission fluid level and condition. Inspect the wiring harness for any damage or loose connections. Test the transmission fluid pressure sensor/switch. If the problem persists, have the transmission inspected by a qualified mechanic. The P0840 code is a generic OBD2 code that indicates a problem with the transmission fluid pressure sensor/switches circuit. This code can be caused by a variety of factors, including a faulty sensor, a wiring problem, or a problem with the transmission itself. If you are experiencing this code, it is important to have it diagnosed and repaired by a qualified mechanic as soon as possible. A mechanic will typically diagnose code P0840 by following these steps. Reading the trouble codes. The first step is to use a scan tool to read the trouble codes stored in the vehicle's computer. Code P0840 indicates a problem with the transmission fluid pressure sensor/switches circuit. Checking the transmission fluid level. The mechanic will then check the transmission fluid level to ensure it is within the proper range. Low fluid levels can cause the sensor to malfunction. Inspecting the wiring and connectors. The mechanic will visually inspect the wiring and connectors for any signs of damage, such as chafing, corrosion, or loose connections. Damaged wiring can prevent the sensor from sending accurate readings to the computer. Testing the sensor. If the wiring and connectors appear to be in good condition, the mechanic will test the sensor itself. This may involve using a multimeter to measure the sensor's resistance, or using a scan tool to monitor its output voltage. Checking for other potential causes. If the sensor appears to be functioning properly, the mechanic will check for other potential causes of the code, such as a faulty transmission control module, TCM, or a problem with the internal transmission components. Some common errors that can occur when diagnosing code P0840 include misinterpreting the code. Code P0840 can sometimes be confused with other transmission-related codes, such as P0700 or P0730. It is important to correctly identify the code before proceeding with diagnosis. Overlooking a simple fix. In some cases, the code P0840 may be caused by a simple issue, such as a low transmission fluid level. It is important to check for these simple fixes before replacing any parts. Not testing the sensor properly. The transmission fluid pressure sensor is a relatively inexpensive part, but it is important to test it properly before replacing it. Replacing a good sensor will not fix the problem and may even cause further damage. Code P0840 is a relatively serious code that can indicate a problem with the transmission. If the code is ignored, it can lead to further transmission damage and costly repairs. It is important to have the code diagnosed and repaired as soon as possible. The repairs that can fix code P0840 will vary depending on the underlying cause of the code. Some common repairs include adding transmission fluid. If the transmission fluid level is low, adding fluid may resolve the issue. Repairing or replacing wiring. If the wiring or connectors are damaged, they will need to be repaired or replaced. Replacing the sensor. If the sensor is faulty, it will need to be replaced. Repairing or replacing the TCM. In some cases, the TCM may be faulty and need to be repaired or replaced. Repairing internal transmission components. If the problem is caused by internal transmission components, such as a worn clutch or solenoid, these components will need to be repaired or replaced. The cost of repairs will vary depending on the specific problem and the parts that need to be replaced. It is important to get an estimate from a qualified mechanic before proceeding with any repairs.